honeybee nest is a marvel of engineering. When people look at it, they really appreciate what honeybees do to have a place that meets all of these certain characteristics to protect their colony and move that colony forward. So I want to spend a little bit of time in this video talking about what honeybees want in a nest site, but also what they put into that nest. First things first, what do honeybees look for when they are searching for a nest site? Well, nest sites are designed, right, for protection. It's a home. It's a place where the colony can reside. Hopefully it's close to resources in the environment. That would not only include nectar and pollen, but potentially also water. And when bees are looking for nest sites, when they are doing that swarming process, you've got this swarm cluster hanging from a tree limb, it's scouting the countryside, looking for a place to call home. They're usually trying to find nests that meet certain characteristics that honeybees themselves consider optimum. And so what are these things? Well, research has shown that honeybees prefer nests that have cavities or volumes that are about 40 liters, roughly 10 gallons in size. So that's pretty amazing and pretty specific, right? But that observation is what led Langstroth to decide to make his deep brood box about 40 liters in volume. He noticed that bees prefer cavities that are that size, so he made cavities that are those sizes so that bees could use those in beekeepers' beekeeping operations. We've got this cavity that bees want. Another thing that they prefer about that cavity is they prefer for that cavity to have small-ish entrances, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 19 squared centimeters or about 3 squared inches. What that means is that entrance is small enough, essentially, for the bees to be able to protect it. They don't want invaders to come into that nest. They want a really small, defined entrance that they then can take care of so that as they come and go, they are safe from predation. Another thing that they want specific to that entrance is they want that entrance at the bottom of the cavity rather than the top or in the center. Now, yes, bees will move into cavities with entrances all sorts of places, but if you give them a lot of options in the environment, they're going to choose 40-liter volume cavities that have nest entrances that are about 19 squared centimeters at the bottom of those nests. And while we're talking about nest entrances, they also prefer for those nest entrances to point south. And so a lot of people have theorized that that's because we know a lot about honeybees mainly from studying them in the northern hemisphere. So they point south to catch that sun as it moves along kind of that equator path. But we did some research in Africa years ago, and we found that bees were choosing nest sites a lot, preferentially, that had nest sites facing south again. So you would think if it was important to point to the equator, that bees in Africa would also point their nest north to the equator, but instead they were choosing cavities that typically have that southern entrance. We've got a 40-liter cavity, we've got this 19 squared centimeter entrance, we've got this entrance at the bottom of the nest, and we've got this entrance facing south. Now bees prefer for those nests to be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 4.5 meters or 15 feet up in the air. Now, keep in mind, everything that I'm telling you is what is considered optimal for bees. If you give bees a lot of choices, they will choose these things. I've already said bees will nest, 4.5 meters in the air. That's where they prefer to nest. But bees will also nest in the ground. They'll also nest 30 meters in the air and 1 meter from the ground. All of these things are a little bit fluid, but we're talking about optimum nest sites, and in this case, bees prefer something that's about 4.5 meters in the air. If you think about it, it's real intuitive. They're just trying to get something up off of the ground that they can protect. Finally, bees love cavities that previous bee colonies have occupied. They're strongly attracted to nest cavities that already have other comb present in the nest. So if we think again about these characteristics, a certain volume, a certain height, a certain entrance size that points a certain direction from a certain location on the nest, as well as the presence of comb in the nest. Once bees have found the most optimum nest available for them in the environment that hopefully has some combinations of these parameters, they're going to move into it, and that nest cavity becomes the home for the colony. So what goes into the nest? Well, you've got the adult bees going into the nest, and then shortly thereafter the queen will start laying eggs, so you'll have that complete colony. Remember, the colony is composed of the living bees, so the eggs, the larvae, the pupae, and the adults. So what you have in a nest, if all is going well, adult bees rearing populations of brood, also performing all the tasks consistent with what bees do in their nest. In addition to having eggs, larvae, pupa, adults, they also have nest components that they add to that cavity. Everybody knows honeybees produce wax, and so they build this waxy infrastructure that we as beekeepers call the comb, C-O-M-B. If honey's in it, it's called honeycomb. If brood's in it, it's brood comb. If pollen's in it, the pollen comb. You've got this wax matrix that the bees build. They suspend from the top of the nest. The queen lays eggs in it, they rear their brood in it, they store honey and pollen in it, they use it for communication purposes, probably disease and pest control purposes, and maybe even the handling of pesticides. So you've got this wax infrastructure in the nest. But bees will also collect tree saps and rosins and add to the nest in a substance that we call propolis. So to the nest, bees add wax and propolis. And finally, to that nest, bees leave the nest, collect nectar and pollen, and bring it back to that nest and store that nectar in the cells that they convert then to honey. They store that pollen in the cells that they convert then to bee bread. So the nest has these certain minimum characteristics that the bees prefer. It's a home for the colony, a place that they can be sheltered and protected, a place that they can raise their young, a place that they can store their food, a place that they can perpetuate as a colony. They want to have something that we all want to have, a good place to call home.